This is part 2, episode 67. They returned to shore, Hui Yuhao still holding Wang Donger's hand tightly. He had too many things to say to her. Hui Yuhao grinned as he asked, "Donger, is that what I should call you from now on?" Wang Donger lowered her head and said softly, "Yes." "Should we leave after the entire event is over?" Hui Yuhao shook his head and replied, "No, it's enough just looking at you. Have you seen enough of me?" Wang Donger was amused. Hui Yuhao changed his words. "Never in this lifetime." Wang Donger smiled. There weren't any outsiders now, and she became less shy. She dared to look into Hui Yuhao's eyes now. "Yuhao, I'm sorry. I hid my identity intentionally from you previously because," Hui Yuhao interrupted her, "I understand." "I'm actually very glad." "Glad?" Wang Donger was perplexed as she looked at him. Hui Yuhao chuckled and said, "Of course I'm glad. If you came in as a female student, I wouldn't have been able to enter your life. You're too pretty, so you'd have captured the attention of others easily. You wouldn't have stayed in the same dorm room as me, and would have had no chance of building up our feelings. We wouldn't even have our martial fusion soul skills. Naturally, what happened today wouldn't have happened either. Shall we return to the Sea God's Pavilion?" Wang Dong asked. "All right." Hui Yuhao was bubbling with joy now. His eyes didn't deviate from Wang Donger at all, as if he couldn't get enough of looking at her. As they walked towards the Sea God's Pavilion, Hui Yuhao said, "Wang Donger, I now understand why you did all those weird things you did when you first entered the academy. For example, you mysteriously went to bathe on your own and you'd get angry with me after I slept with you. You're so bad. Why do you have to mention all of this?" Wang Donger blushed and smacked him. Wang Donger rolled her eyes at him. "Why are you asking such a stupid question at this point?" "Of course not. Why would I have a twin sister?" Hui Yuhao mocked. "So you were matchmaking yourself then?" Wang Donger blushed. "Who asked you to be such a wooden block?" Hui Yuhao sighed. "Yes? I should have thought of it earlier, especially since I saw you that day. Did you remove your veil intentionally for me to see, or did you intentionally leave your name Wang Chua behind to draw me to the sea god's fate?" Wang Donger was stunned. "What veil? What Wang Chua?" Hui Yuhao laughed. "What? Why are you trying to conceal things from me at this point? I met you that day when I returned to the academy. You were already dressed like a girl then. You also wore a veil, which you dropped when you walked past me. I caught hold of it. When I took a look at it, it was embroidered with the words Wang Chua on it. You snatched it back before running away. I failed to chase you. When I reached Shrek City, I lost track of you." Wang Donger was confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. Since you returned, I never met you before today. I only peeked at you when you were crying outside the Sea God's Pavilion." "What Wang Chua? I don't know." "What? That wasn't you?" Hui Yuhao was stunned. He was sure that Wang Donger had no need to lie to him anymore at this point. However, the incident that day was definitely real. What was going on? Wang Donger felt that something was amiss. "Yuhao, think about it carefully again. Are you sure you saw someone that looked like me? There was no difference at all?" Hui Yuhao furrowed his brows and tried his best to recall what had happened that day. His spirit eyes were very sharp, his spiritual power was immense, and his memory was impeccable. As he tried to recall more detail, he said, "She did seem a little different, now that you mention it. She looked a bit older than you, and she was slightly taller than you. Her voice also sounded a little different. However, I only had a short glance at her then, and didn't interact much with her. The feeling she gave me was also very familiar though, but it was slightly different from the familiar feeling that you give me." Wang Donger was shocked as she watched Hui Yuhao, and asked, "There's actually someone who looks just like me. How is that possible?" Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly. "I don't know either. However, she should be from the academy, since she walked out from the academy that day. Perhaps she's from another academy and trying to get into the inner courtyard just like you mentioned." "Donger, are you sure that you don't have a twin sister?" Wang Donger replied without any hesitation, "Of course I'm sure. I never ever had a sister. I'll go and ask tomorrow. If she tried to enter the inner courtyard, there must be a record, right?" Hui Yuhao was also very doubtful now. In his memory, Wang Chua was too similar to Wang Donger. The differences between them were almost negligible. Even after acute observation, it was still very difficult for him to differentiate them. "I understand now." Hui Yuhao exclaimed suddenly, "What do you understand?" Wang Dong asked hurriedly. Hui Yuhao said, I understand why I feel so familiar to her. Compared to her, you're evidently 2 or 3 years younger. She's more like the goddess of light that we exhibited. This also means that you'll look exactly like her in another 2 years. She's practically your sister, the two of you look too alike. Wang Donga and the Wang Chua he saw were actually 2 different people. This was too weird, especially since Hui Yuhao realized this after Wang Dong just became Wang Donga. Hui Yuhao laughed bitterly. Fortunately, we have the Haodong power. Otherwise, it'll be difficult to tell you apart from Wang Chua if you stood next to each other. Wang Donga caressed his forehead and said, You seem like you're speaking the truth. Are you sure you weren't running a fever that day and hallucinating? Hui Yuhao scratched his head and laughed. That might be possible. Perhaps I just missed my goddess too much. Furthermore, you kept saying that you had a twin sister. That's why I might have imagined it. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. Whether or not she exists, I only need my Wang Donga. They had returned to the sea god's pavilion as they spoke. After entering, Hui Yuhao laughed softly. Are we staying over in your room or my room tonight? Wang Donga blushed. What are you talking about? We can't live together. We can only do it after we marry. Her face was as red as an apple. Hui Yuhao lowered his head and was about to kiss her, but she dodged him. Keep your distance. Hui Yuhao chuckled. You're overthinking it. I'm saying that we should cultivate together. Did you see how much faster our cultivation speed was with Haodong power? Since you saw that, am I supposed to still cultivate on my own? Wang Dong was filled with caution, but she was evidently delighted. We can't do that either. Who knows if you're getting up to something? Go back to your room and sleep. Hui Yuhao looked very pitiful. But I still have a lot left to say to you. Wang Donga laughed and said, Let's talk tomorrow. Aren't you tired from this whole event? I felt your rapid heartbeat just now. To ensure my safety, I'll return to my room first. As she spoke, she quickly fled. Hui Yuhao laughed as he pursued her. Because he used his soul thrusters, he managed to block off Wang Donga's path. Let's see where you can run to. Hui Yuhao widened his arms and looked at her delightedly. Wang Donga stopped in her tracks, and the smile on her face faded. She walked slowly towards Hui Yuhao and grabbed his waist lightly before leaning on his chest. Her body was very soft, seemingly even softer than before. Hui Yuhao hugged her subconsciously, and his heartbeat started to increase rapidly. It wasn't his first time hugging Wang Donga. When the two of them unleashed their martial fusion soul skills, he would often hug her. However, he was never as agitated as how he was now. It wasn't his good brother in his arms now, but, Yuhao, I'm really happy right now. Did you know that? I was really uncomfortable then. I was scared that you wouldn't choose me. What would I have done if you didn't choose me? I don't know. Before you made your choice, my mind was completely empty. After all, Ning Qian and Senior Ling are both very outstanding. They'd have helped you a lot too if they were together with you. At that point in time, you didn't know it was me either. I wanted to remove my hat on several occasions, but I didn't want to garner your recognition with just my looks. I also didn't want my appearance to bring you trouble in the blind date. Everything's been settled now. However, I know that we'll need some time to accept our new identities. I don't know if my feelings for you are more brotherly or romantic. I'm sure it's even more uncertain for you. Can we start over again? Give us some time. After hearing Wang Dong's murmuring voice, Hui Yuhao grabbed onto her arms and pulled her closer. It was as if he wanted to fuse her into his body. Are you angry? Wang Dong asked. Hui Yuhao shook his head and said, No. You're right. In this world, you understand me the best. It's true that we need some time for our feelings to change. I really don't know if my feelings for you are brotherly or more romantic. However what? Wang Dong was a little nervous as she struggled out of Hui Yuhao's arms. She was staring at him. A smile surfaced across Hui Yuhao's face. However, don't you think that I'm a lecher by reminding me of this in this position? Wang Donga laughed. That's right. You're a lecher. A big lecher? After she finished speaking, she turned around and ran away. However, Hui Yuhao was prepared. He pulled her back and hugged her again. As he hugged her tiny waist, Hui Yuhao said softly, You dared to call me a fool. You're also very foolish. Don't you understand me? Without your consent, I won't violate you. I can wait. Wang Donga was a little domineering. Of course you can wait. Even if you have to wait for your entire life, you must still wait. Take this. As she spoke, she suddenly turned around and gave Hui Yuhao something. All right, Donga. I have a question for you. Hui Yuhao said, what? Wang Donga was confused as she looked at him. Hui Yuhao asked, why is your hair so messy? Wang Donga laughed, fool. I braided my hair in the morning, but it was blown into a mess by the wind. That's why it's like this. I'm going. Wang Donga waved goodbye to him. Hui Yuhao became depressed. We really can't cultivate together, no. Let's wait to calm down first. Wang Donga smiled. As they looked at each other, their gazes met. On this miraculous night, they couldn't control their feelings. However, the change in their relationship seemed to have added a layer between them. Whether it was Hui Yuhao or Wang Donga, they could clearly sense it. They knew that they were deeply imprinted in each other's hearts, but they needed time to accept the change in their relationship. As he watched Wang Donga leave, Hui Yuhao looked a little lost. He returned to his room with his pouch. He felt his heart beating faster and faster. Just like what had happened on the Sea God's Lake, he recalled everything that he had experienced with Wang Dong. Things had changed tonight. Hui Yuhao didn't cultivate, and his mind was filled with Wang Donga's figure. For some reason, her ravishing figure kept on pacing up and down as he entered his dreams. In the morning, the warm sunlight penetrated his room and shone on his body. Perhaps he had been thinking too much last night, but he was feeling very lazy right now. Donga, Donga. He muttered and turned over in his bed. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of knocking on the door rang out, jolting the half-asleep Hui Yuhao awake. As he flipped his body around, he sat up. He subconsciously shouted, Donga. He took a few steps forward to open the door. However, it wasn't Wang Donga standing outside. It was someone with an elderly-looking face. Yang Xiaosha was amused as he looked at Hui Yuhao and said, young man, you're really a young man. You must have been through a lot last night. Hui Yuhao's face turned red. Dean Yang. Yang Xiaosha laughed slightly. Congratulations. Surely you didn't expect Wang Dong to be a girl, right? Hui Yuhao was stunned and replied, from your tone, it seems like you knew about it. Yang Xiaosha laughed, of course I knew. Elder Mu also knew about it. That's why I mentioned that soul masters have a lot to learn. There's a book in the library that specifically introduces rare martial souls. If you have time, you can borrow it to read. It records the radiant butterfly goddess in detail. The radiant butterfly goddess is extremely ravishing, and it only appears on a female soul master. That's why we knew she was a girl from the moment she entered the academy. Hui Yuhao was stunned. Then why didn't you tell me that, and why did you still let me stay in the same room as her? Yang Xiaosha said, I'm sure you know that Wang Donga is from the Clear Sky sect, and is the most probable successor to the sect. Our academy has a close relationship with the Clear Sky sect. Why would we expose her? Let's go, many people are waiting for you, waiting for me. Hui Yuhao still felt slightly in a daze. He hadn't had a good rest last night. After washing up, Hui Yuhao couldn't be bothered to eat breakfast, and quickly rushed down. Just like Yang Xiaosha had said, both sides of the long table were now seated with elders. With Elder Xian sitting in the main seat. Ever since Elder Xian became the master of the Sea God's Pavilion, he had stopped acting so sloppily. He was now dressed simply, and his hair was properly combed. There was a gentle, smiling light in his eyes. Apologies, elders, for making all of you wait. Hui Yuhao rushed over and lowered his head in guilt. Elder Xian smiled and said, it should have been a good night for you. You and Donga are finally together, but we didn't sleep well last night. We were played with like little kids that don't know anything about this world. You should know that you're a part of us now after special permission was granted to you. You broke the age record to be a part of the Sea God's Pavilion. After hearing Elder Xian mentioning Hui Yuhao and Wang Donga, the elders all started to smile. Hui Yuhao lifted his head up at this moment and saw Teacher Fan Yu and Zhong Leshuan, as well as a few familiar elders. As they saw him looking over, they nodded to acknowledge him. The Vice Dean of the Soul Tool Department, Qian Duo, laughed. Hui Yuhao, come over here. Sit beside me. As he spoke, he pointed to an empty seat next to him, and even shot Yang Xiaosha a provocative look. Yang Xiaosha was unmoved as he turned his attention elsewhere, as if he didn't care about Qian Duo's attempt to assert his authority over him. Hui Yuhao rushed beside Qian Duo and sat down. Zhong Leshuan was opposite to him. The two of them were seated close to the main seat. Elder Xian said, Xiaosha, host the conference. Let Yu Hao settle down first. I don't think he can explain clearly given how anxious he looked. Yes. Yang Xiaosha acknowledged his words respectfully and replied, Elders, we called for this conference today because of Hu Yuhao's unprecedented orange soul rings and the special abilities he demonstrated yesterday. At the same time, there are some things we need all of you to decide together. After pondering for a moment, Hu Yuhao said, talking about spirits, I need to start from the beginning. That's because this is related to a secret that I've kept for a long time. That's why I've never told anyone about it in the past. Only Elder Mu knew a little, but he didn't know the full story either. To tell the truth, there was another teacher in my spiritual sea. As he said this, he shocked everyone present. While the elders weren't young, their curiosity was greater than most youths. This was especially because there was hardly anything in this world that could arouse it anymore. When Hu Yuhao decided to develop spirits, he knew that he couldn't conceal the secret regarding Electrolux anymore. Otherwise, he couldn't recount everything in enough detail or explain the history of his seal. Before I entered the academy, I left my original family when my soul power reached rank 10. I headed toward the Great Star Doe Forest on my own. Around the perimeter of the Great Star Doe Forest, I met eldest senior Bei Bei and teacher Xiao Wei, who has already left the academy. After that, I went into the forest on my own. On the way, I was attacked by a soul beast. It was a 10-year soul beast, and I was fortunate enough to kill it. However, I was critically injured too. But then, the sky turned dreary, and a special strength entered my spiritual sea. After that, I was rescued by Bei Bei and teacher Xiao Wei. Hu Yuhao told the truth about Electrolux's background. Aside from the Sky Dream Ice Worm, he recounted everything. He also mentioned how Electrolux had guided him in his spiritual cultivation and passed on some skills to him. Of course, he only talked about how Electrolux was a light-type entity. He didn't mention anything about necromancy. He was certain that the elders would call him an evil soul master if he mentioned Electrolux's title as the Calamity Necromancer and told them that Electrolux had passed down necromancy to him. He didn't want that to happen. He only claimed that Electrolux was a spiritual and light-type archmage. After he finished imparting Electrolux's background, Hu Yuhao started to talk about the Snow Empress embryo that was auctioned during the last edition of the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament, as well as how the body sect had attacked the illustrious Virtue Hall. That was how he had managed to fuse with the Snow Empress embryo, and how Electrolux had helped to seal the Snow Empress. After that, he talked about how he and Wang Donga went to the Clear Sky sect, and how he met with danger on the frigid Jade Essence bed. He also detailed how Electrolux had burned the last shred of his divine sense to help him fuse with the Snow Empress, which gave birth to this spirit. Even with the elders' wealth of experience, they were stunned after hearing his unbelievable stories. Whether it was the remnants of a powerful archmage's divine sense, the fusion process between the Snow Empress and Hu Yuhao, or the appearance of the spirit, it was beyond the knowledge of ordinary soul masters. This was how I came to possess the Snow Empress spirit. I call her the Snow Lady. Her look now should resemble an ice sky snow lady's appearance when they are younger. Her abilities are closely related to mine, but she has her own independent thinking. She can coordinate with me in a fight, as well as use my soul power and her spiritual power. From a certain standpoint, she's a completely independent life form. With my help, her fighting abilities are able to increase significantly. Perhaps it's because the Snow Empress is too strong. There's also teacher Electrolux's divine sense that he combusted. After she fused with me, 4 soul rings were created. At that point in time, Clear Sky Sect Master Niu Qian mentioned that it was because the Snow Empress' strength needed to take up several soul ring spots, and she had many powerful soul skills that could be bestowed upon me. I'm able to tap into the powers of 3 of these 4 soul rings now. However, I still have no idea how to activate the power of the last soul ring. After possessing the Snow Empress spirit, I thought about it carefully. Our situation was very special. We encountered the sudden change after the Snow Empress strength was sealed. However, what if soul masters fused with the spiritual imprint and soul power of a normal soul beast? It won't be so dangerous. If the soul beasts are willing, I'm 70% confident of completing the seal and creating another spirit. If the soul master's cultivation is below mine, my confidence will be even higher. He stopped speaking here. Then he signaled, and the Snow Lady made 1 revolution around the elders. She stopped for a moment in front of every elder and allowed them to sense how magical she was. Finally, the Snow Lady returned to his shoulder. She remained as excited and curious as ever. Evidently, she was more than willing to stay outside Hui Yuhao's body instead of sleeping inside of it. Elder Xian looked at the elders, who looked very pensive, and asked Hui Yuhao, what preparations do other soul masters need to make if they want to fuse with a spirit? How many spirits can one soul master have? What are the difficulties in the fusion process? Hui Yuhao had thought of these problems for a long time. He replied without hesitation, firstly, a soul master must have an empty soul ring spot if he wants to fuse with a spirit. That's absolutely necessary. If the spirit he is fusing with is within his tolerance limit, he can fuse with it normally. However, he needs to consider the problem of insufficient soul ring spots if the spirit's cultivation is way above his. This was what happened to me. 4 empty soul ring spots were taken up by the Snow Lady. Of course, this was because the Snow Empress was too strong. Elder Xian furrowed his brow and said, however, most soul masters only have 1 empty soul ring spot. Hui Yuhao nodded and replied, that's why I believe that it's better for one to be a 7-ringed soul sage first. In that way, their tolerance will be better, and they can fuse with stronger spirits. Soul beasts of higher cultivations are also more intelligent. They will be more helpful after the fusion. Furthermore, there's one more special situation where there is more than 1 soul ring spot, twin martial souls. Elder Xian's eyes brightened and he said, that makes sense. Twin martial souls are normally divided into the main and accessory martial soul. A soul master with twin martial souls won't add rings to his accessory martial soul so easily. Zhong Leshuan suddenly opened her mouth. Elder Xian, do you think there's a possibility that we can contact the core circle of the Great Star Do Forest and negotiate with them? It's not easy to find an old soul beast, but if it's from their side. Elder Xian shook his head, and the other elders also furrowed their brows. Leshuan, your idea is very good, but it's a little wild. We've been enemies for quite some time, and things haven't cooled down even after so many years. It won't be easy to discuss it with them. They won't give us a chance. We can only count on ourselves regarding his matter. We can't take the risk. If those fellows from the Great Star Do Forest discover the existence of spirits, their misunderstandings might deepen. Shrek City is too close to the forest. Don't forget the wave of soul beasts then. We have to research an experiment, but it has to be done very prudently. Zhong Leshuan nodded and didn't say anything else. The rest of the elders agreed with Elder Xian. Only Hui Yuhao was slightly moved after hearing Zhong Leshuan's words. He understood what she was trying to say. She meant that the academy could negotiate with the soul beasts in the Great Star Do Forest. The strongest savage beasts were as intelligent as humans. If they were willing to try, it would be much more convenient for their research of spirits. Of course, he couldn't help but comment even though it was a little inappropriate. Elder Xian, elders, I think eldest senior sister has a point. If we make progress in our research, it could be an opportunity to dispel our hatred with the soul beasts from the Great Star Do Forest. If we succeed in our research, we can negotiate with them, and we wouldn't need to hunt soul beasts in the future. We can work with the older soul beasts. They can live longer, and both parties will benefit from this deal. No matter what their style of thinking is, I think it's unlikely that they'll reject such a proposition. Elder Xian laughed and looked at Hui Yuhao. He said, young people are indeed very rash. However, your thinking is not mature enough. Why did I ask you how many spirits one person can possess? If a soul master can only fuse with 1 spirit like you say, how many soul rings does a soul master need? 9. Do you think those top-ranked soul beasts from the Star Do Forest would give us a chance to negotiate knowing that they'd be offering us greater strength to hunt even more soul beasts and add even more soul rings? Hui Yuhao nodded and replied, I will do my best. In addition, I'm willing to contribute the pact sealing spell to the academy. What? As Hui Yuhao spoke, everyone was stunned. All the elders had a shocked look in their eyes. As they looked at each other, they could see the amazement in each other's eyes. Elder Xian had been ready to dismiss the meeting, but after hearing his words, he sat down again and said, you have to think this over carefully. Elder Xian's expression was very serious as he said this. All the elders focused their attention on Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao replied with a sincere look on his face. Elder Xian, elders, I've thought over this carefully. I'm an orphan with no family. Everything that I have now was given to me by the academy. I would not be where I am today if the academy didn't nurture me. I received the best education and care here. It's also here that I felt familial warmth. The results of the research will be very beneficial in settling the conflict between soul masters and soul beasts. If it really succeeds, it'll definitely alleviate the dispute between us and soul beasts. How can I do this alone? I don't only wish to offer the academy the pact sealing spell. I also hope that the Academy can develop spirits and make it a future developmental path for all Soul Masters. Elder Xian said, you have to understand that it'll no longer be yours once you give it up. Furthermore, have you thought of how valuable it is? I can tell you that it's priceless. The Academy can complete it for you, but we can't repay you for such valuable research. I'll feel uncomfortable. You've already contributed countless valuable blueprints for soul tools to the Academy. How can we still take something so valuable from you? Hui Yuhao smiled and replied, Elder Xian, I don't know what to say. However, I believe that it's a good thing for the Academy to control the method of developing spirits. If it's only in my hands, it might be a bad thing for me. That's why I don't just hope to give it to the Academy. I further wish that the Academy can announce it to the world in the near future. The research of spirits will be completed by the Academy, and not by me alone. I can avoid a lot of trouble this way. The Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament is about to begin in a few months. I'm going to compete in it with the team, and I'll need to use my spirit then. If any outsiders know that I control the soul method of their creation, it might be very dangerous for me. I still want to contribute more to the Academy and the Tang sect. I'm sure you and the other elders won't watch as I put myself in a perilous spot, right? The Academy can take this burden for me. All the elders started to smile as he sounded very relaxed with his words. However, they couldn't hide their admiration for him. Before Hui Yuhao had proposed to give the spell to the school, none of the elders had asked him to hand his research over. Why? It was too valuable. Just like Elder Xian had mentioned, spirits were priceless in the eyes of soul masters. With such a secret, Hui Yuhao could become a master of his time no matter where he went. Even though what he said was true, how difficult would it be to find a strong backer with such valuable research? Hui Yuhao subconsciously took a look at Zhong Leshuan. He had always thought that she would be the heir to the Sea God's Pavilion. She wasn't recognized as the top talent in the inner courtyard for nothing. Although she had just passed 30, she already had 8 rings. She wasn't far from a titled Dolo either. Why were the internal courtyard students so submissive towards her? It wasn't because she was pretty, but because she was truly capable. Elder Xian smiled. You don't have to look at Leshuan. Leshuan will be nurtured as a substitute heir to the Sea God's Pavilion. While the position of the Master of the Sea God's Pavilion is very important, he doesn't have the right to decide everything. Zhong Leshuan smiled at Hui Yuhao, but her expression didn't seem to change at all. Hui Yuhao's spiritual senses were very acute. He could sense that there was indeed no change in her emotions. Does anyone have any objections? Elder Xian turned to the elders. There were none. Hui Yuhao had already demonstrated his abilities in the Sea God's fate. As he teamed up with Wang Donga, they managed to suppress 5 inner courtyard students. Even though there was some kind of elemental suppression, the elders still recognized his abilities. Twin martial souls and an ultimate martial soul. He was a true talent. He even treated the Academy as his family and gave such an important research to the Academy. Even the strict elders couldn't find any fault with him. Elder Xian said, all right, since there are no alternative propositions, we shall vote. Those who agree with me, please raise your hand. Besides Hui Yuhao, the rest of the Sea God's Pavilion's members raised their right hands. This meant that Elder Xian's proposition had their unanimous approval. From the start, Hui Yuhao wasn't just a simple member of the Sea God's Pavilion. Although his identity wasn't announced outside of the Sea God's Pavilion, his position in the Academy was still enhanced significantly. Elder Xian said, Yuhao, you can pass your research to me directly after you record it. I'll keep it in the library of the Sea God's Pavilion as a code-red secret document. Whoever wants to read it in the future must seek permission through a conference first. All the elders agreed with Elder Xian's suggestion. This research was too important, while the library of the Sea God's Pavilion was the most tightly guarded place in the Academy. It was the most appropriate place to store the research. Hui Yuhao nodded immediately and felt more relieved. He only had one feeling at this point: it was good to have a family. With the Academy around, he wasn't alone. He had been under a lot of pressure because this research was too valuable. It was undoubtedly the best choice to pass it to the Academy. Dismissed. Elder Xian dismissed the conference. Hui Yuhao stood up hurriedly and watched as the elders left. He only left after them. Hui Yuhao suddenly felt something at this moment, and he glanced sideways. He saw Wang Donga, who was looking around as she walked in his direction from the staircase. Hui Yuhao felt a wave of warmth course over his body when he saw her, and his gaze met those huge powder blue eyes as he pointed outside. The sea god's pavilion wasn't a place for billing and cooing. The elders' senses were extremely powerful, and they would probably be aware of any disturbance, no matter how minor. Wang Donga nodded in understanding, and tiptoed out of the sea god's pavilion first. Yang Shaoxia was naturally aware of this, and he smiled as he said, "Go. Wang Donga is powerful, she's the future heir to the Clear Sky sect, and that's enough to match you. You have to be good to her." Hu Yuhao blushed a little, and he nodded hurriedly before bidding farewell and stepping outside. Wang Donga was waiting at the entrance. She wore a long light blue dress today, which matched her flowing blue hair. Her exceptional beauty caused the sea god's pavilion's originally enchanting scenery to lose its splendor. She was like the brilliant and riveting sun, and even just standing there, she could dim all the light in the world. "You're just so pretty, Donga," Hu Yuhao blurted out in admiration. Wang Donga rolled her eyes and said, "Did you only realize that today?" Hu Yuhao chuckled and replied, "Of course not, except you've been calling yourself a guy before this, so how could I have such reveries? It's different now, here." Wang Donga took out a small cloth bag from somewhere. The outer layer was white, and it was clean and spotless. Hu Yuhao took the bag, and realized it was warm. He opened it and saw 2 steamed buns inside, along with 2 deshelled eggs. The eggs were from a bird-type soul beast, with completely transparent egg whites, looking like frozen water crystals. They were extremely nutritious, while the 2 steamed buns had vegetables and pieces of meat inside. "Go ahead. I know you haven't eaten yet," Wang Donga whispered. Hu Yuhao didn't restrain himself, and he picked up an egg and popped it into his mouth. What he ate wasn't important, it was the thought that was important. Wang Donga's scrupulousness made him warm all over, and whatever he ate tasted as delicious as could be. They gobbled down the food in a few mouthfuls, and drank some water from a water skin Wang Donga handed him. Hu Yuhao immediately felt better and more relaxed with food in his stomach. "You're so nice, Donga." Wang Donga giggled and said, "Why do I feel like you're so stupid?" Hu Yuhao said indifferently, "It doesn't matter if I'm stupid, as long as you don't turn your back on me because of that." No, I won't. Let's go." Wang Donga grasped his hand and started walking away. "Where are we going?" Hu Yuhao asked, confused at the sudden switch. Wang Donga said, "We are going to look for that Wang Chioa. I asked about it when I woke up this morning. Today is the reporting day for the new batch of inner courtyard students who have just passed the examination, so she will definitely show up if she managed to pass the assessment. Who's your wife? Who do you think?" They were bickering, but their hands had been tightly wound around each other from the beginning to the end. Hu Yuhao hadn't slept properly last night, but neither had Wang Donga. After the night, they still felt a little unfamiliar with their current statuses, but they were starting to get closer to the chemistry that they used to have. Their bodies were becoming closer, and so were their hearts. The feeling where the results flowed naturally when circumstances were right seemed to have arrived. The new inner courtyard students were supposed to report to the outer courtyard rather than the inner courtyard. In the end, only those students whose identities had been confirmed could be brought into the inner courtyard. Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga didn't need the ferry. They soared into the sky, and the wings of Wang Dong's radiant butterfly goddess extended outwards while Hu Yuhao stepped on the lake's surface and pushed off from it to propel them forward. What made him a little surprised was that the ice formed from last night's snowy dance of ultimate ice hadn't melted completely, and the 2 of them crossed the sea god's lake in no time. However, Hu Yuhao's expression became a little dull. They were just starting out in their relationship, so their thoughts and senses were the most sensitive. Wang Donga immediately detected the change in his emotions and asked, "What's wrong?" Hu Yuhao heaved a faint sigh and said, "Do you still remember when we met her on the shore? She flew across Sea God's Lake from the inner courtyard just like that, and now we have the same ability. She's been missing for such a long time. There are still no news about her." Wang Donga's expression grew a little sullen when she heard Hu Yuhao mention Ma Xiaodao. She sighed and said, "Yes. I wonder how she's doing. I'm afraid she..." Hu Yuhao raised his hand to signal her to stop talking. He had the same intense anxiety and worry in his heart, but he truly didn't want to hear about that possibility. Wang Donga knew where the new inner courtyard students were supposed to report, and she brought Hu Yuhao to the outer courtyard senior grade school block where they proceeded straight to a large classroom. It was already lesson time. The outer courtyard looked extremely tranquil, and most of the students were currently taking lessons. However, there were some who were still outside. There was a class currently having a sparring session in Shrek Plaza. As Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga held hands and walked across the plaza, the students that were only 12 or 13 years old stared and ogled Wang Donga. "Wow, she's so pretty. She's so pretty. Guys, look, why are they holding hands? They must be seniors, she's just so beautiful. The color of her hair is so nice. Greetings, teacher. What's the problem? Hui Yu-hao hurriedly asked politely. The male teacher pointed at their connected hands and lowered his voice as he said, "What year are you from? What class are you from? Look at you guys, what is this? We're still inside the academy, and this is the example you want to set for the younger students. What if you teach them the wrong things? I will report this to the teachers, so that you will be punished accordingly." Both Hui Yu-hao and Wang Dong were rooted to the spot. They were still bickering like lovebirds before this, and hadn't noticed this point at all. Yes. Most of the outer courtyard students were still kids. Hui Yu-hao hurriedly released Wang Dong's hand and bowed respectfully to the teacher before he wore an apologetic look and said, "I'm sorry, teacher. We are in the wrong, and we promise that this won't happen again in the future. Please forgive us." The teacher's dark and gloomy face regained some color as he said, "You guys are too brazen. This is Shrek Academy, and I imagine it's not your first or second day at the academy judging by your age. How can you be so unruly? You have to be punished. Tell me, what class are you two from? Send someone to find your teacher, and only then can you leave. Your teacher will bring you back." Perhaps it was because of teacher Ju Yi, but even though this male teacher was strict and unforgiving, Hui Yu-hao could feel an unspeakable closeness. Furthermore, this teacher was right. He didn't talk further about punishment after Hui Yu-hao's apology, so that meant he was cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. Hui Yu-hao and Wang Dong hadn't had any lessons in the outer courtyard since the last big competition. They felt extremely nostalgic when they suddenly felt the outer courtyard once again. Wang Dong touched Hui Yu-hao and asked, "I'll go?" Hui Yu-hao nodded and made a gesture with his chin. Wang Dong immediately understood, and she bowed lightly to the male teacher before she walked away briskly. The male teacher noticed that their attitudes were not bad, and his temper had calmed down considerably. He shouted at the students watching the show from the side. "What are you looking at? Continue sparring. Don't let me catch anyone slacking off. This video will end here. Thank you for watching."